Whether you're new to Tolkien's Legendarium or a veteran fan, we're sure you've heard of Lady Galadriel. The Noldoran elf witnessed Middle-earth's history over the three ages, the radiant being whose hair supposedly inspired the forging of the Silmarils. Amazon's latest season of The Rings of Power has brought Lady Galadriel back into the center of discussion. However, in this interaction, she's still depicted as young and reckless, unlike the wisely stoic elf we're so familiar with. In this marvelous video, we will explore her early life during the Year of the Trees, and why Peter Jackson depicted her as a dark entity who was momentarily tempted by the One Ring. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
You have no power!
Who is Lady Galadriel? As much of a prominent character as Galadriel has always been, her story remains an enigma. Her story was continually retconned for years, as Tolkien couldn't seem to settle on how he truly wanted her to be as a character. Regardless, let's begin. Galadriel was born to the third Noldoran king, Finarfin, and Eowyn in the Holy Lands of Valinor, even before the sun and the moon came into being. Her father named her Artanis, which meant noblewoman, while her mother named her Nerwin, which meant man-maiden. She came to be known as the mightiest of the Eldar, athletic and robust, towering over the other elven princes. In one of his letters, Tolkien stated, "She was then of Amazonian disposition, and bound up her hair as a crown when taking part in athletic feats," which was how she came to be known as Galadriel, a Sindarin translation of maiden crowned with gleaming hair. In fact, it was said that her godly tresses inspired her uncle, Feanor, to similarly trap the light of the trees in jewels and forge the Silmarils. The great smith Feanor begged Galadriel to give up at least 3 strands of her hair, but she always refused. The Golden Maiden withheld her goodness from the man as she sensed a hidden darkness in him, and never really responded to his admiration. Being 2 of the greatest Eldar to ever exist, Galadriel and Feanor remained unfriends till the end of time. But tragically, she remained oblivious to the same darkness which cast a slight shadow even over her own mind. Nearing the 7th chapter of the Silmarillion, we saw Morgoth's crafty corruption of the Noldor. He began planting poisonous seeds of pride and resistance against the Valar. You see, the Dark Lord desired the great jewels, and sought them out by slowly turning the Noldoran elves against the beings who oversaw their creation. A shadow fell over Valinor's harmony through the extension of Galadriel's inner peace. As Feanor dreamt of faraway realms free to be ruled, so did Galadriel, along with her brother Finrod. Even though she desired to govern a dominion as she saw fit, Galadriel would never dare disrespect the Valar. Following the destruction of the 2 trees of Valinor, which came to be known as the Darkening of Valinor, Galadriel did not swear Feanor's terrible oath, but his words definitely struck a chord in her. She was one of the only Noldoran women who participated in Feanor's rebellion against the Valar. However, she had no part in the kinslaying at Alqualande. In fact, she fiercely defended her mother's Teleri kin, but along with Galadriel's desire to help her Sindarin kind in the Outer Lands, the desire to rule her own realm was rekindled in her. So she left Valinor in support of the exile, even when her father gave up and returned. Upon the flight of the Noldor, Galadriel, along with Finrod and Fingolfin, led her people across the icy wastes of Helcaraxe, finally reaching the northern shores of Middle-earth. What does the Lady of Light look like? As we mentioned, Galadriel's name meant maiden crowned with gleaming hair. While her beauty was a sight to behold, Galadriel's hair was a marvel unmatched, as it reflected the 2 trees of Valinor. The Eldar believed that Galadriel's hair seemed to be woven from the golden light of Lorelin, while being gently touched by the silver of Telperion. So an astounding mixture from the 2 holy trees that shone upon the lands of Valinor. Galadriel was an ethereal being, one of the oldest and most powerful non-Maiar to live. In the Fellowship of the Ring, the chapter Mirror of Galadriel describes Lady Galadriel as being tall, no less than Lord Celeborn, and they both are grave and beautiful. Tolkien went on to tell us, they were clad wholly in white, and the hair of the lady was of deep gold, but no sign of age was upon them, unless it were in the depths of their eyes, for these were keen as lances in the starlight, and yet profound, the wells of deep memory. She was also one of the last elves on Middle-earth to lay her sight upon the trees of Valinor. In Peter Jackson's films, starlight was seen reflecting in her eyes, which was meant to signify this primordial light before the birth of the sun and the moon. For this reason, she was also shown emanating an otherworldly glow, which shone upon all those who stood before her. This was attributed to the light radiated from Valinor, or from the vial of Galadriel. Galadriel's vial held the light from the star of Earendil, which was also present in her fountain. Earendil's star was the elves' most beloved thing. Galadriel gifted her vial to Frodo Baggins as a way to shine light upon the darkest trials of his journey. History of Lady Galadriel. Upon her arrival in Beleriand, Galadriel was one of the few Noldor who was welcomed into the kingdom of Doriath by King Thingol. It was said that Galadriel first met Celeborn in Doriath. Although Tolkien offered varying stories as to how they first encountered each other, the essence of their unbreakable love for one another remained constant throughout. Lady Galadriel was willing to give up her journey to the Undying Lands in order to stay with Celeborn and forever celebrate their love, but they did not hasten to marry as per their elvish life cycle. All the while, Galadriel remained in Doriath, accompanied by Queen Melian, who was the fourth most powerful Maiar to exist. The Queen of Doriath taught Galadriel the ways of the land, essentially everything she needed to know about Middle-earth. Fun fact, Galadriel inherited the art of making lembas bread. You see, in Beleriand, the grain required to make the special bread had run out. The Noldor had introduced a new grain, which was blessed by the Valar themselves. Galadriel's time in Doriath also saw her leaning into her ability of foresight, for she predicted a strange man entering the kingdom, past the girdle of Melian, and changing the fate of Princess Luthien forever. This referred to Beron's first appearance. Despite her close relationship with the Queen, Galadriel remained tight-lipped about the kinslaying, Feanor's oath, and the burning of the Lothgar ships, but she did tell her about the Silmarils and what inspired their forging. Although Galadriel did not play a prominent role in the War of the Jewels, her brother Finrod's passing seemed to be a significant driving force for her character in the Rings of Power TV show. As the First Age came to an end, Galadriel and Celeborn moved to Eriador, where she went on to defy the pardons of the Valar. It began with the Herald of Manwë, offering the Elves of Beleriand passage into Tol Eressëa, but some of the Noldor and Celeborn did not wish to leave. Galadriel refused to return to Aman as she wished to remain with her beloved, and chose to marry him soon after. At the dawn of the Second Age, Galadriel and Celeborn lived in Lindon, until Gil-galad became High King. The couple then migrated near Lake Nununiel, where they were revered as Lord and Lady of the Eldar by clans of the Grey and Green Elves. In the year 300 of the Second Age, Galadriel welcomed her firstborn daughter, Celebrian, who would go on to become the Lady of Rivendell. Not even 200 years later, in the blink of an eye for an elf, Sauron began stirring in the shadows. Here, Galadriel foresaw a vague evil which would rise in the east, corrupting the gullible hearts of mortal men. A solution presented itself. The entity beyond the misty mountains could only be destroyed by an alliance made of all its foes, aka the free peoples of Middle-earth. Hence, the realm of Eregion was founded close to the dwarven kingdom of Khazad-dûm. Now, her husband wasn't too fond of the dwarves, but as one of the Noldor, Galadriel's connection with them went way back. Did you know that during her time in Valinor, Galadriel was the pupil of the Valar, Aule, who was also the creator of the dwarves? Meanwhile, other Noldor elves wished to move into Eregion for its proximity to Khazad-dûm, which housed veins of mithril in its untouched depths. So Feanor's grandson, skilled smith Celebrimbor, established the city of Ost in Edhil, overseen by Lady Galadriel and her husband. She also kept a watch on Lorinand, on the shadowed side of the Misty Mountains. If that wasn't enough, Galadriel also contacted the King of Numenor, presumably to subtly prepare everyone around her for impending evil to rise. Now, when Sauron did visit Eregion in his fair form of Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, Galadriel wasn't deceived, unlike what's shown in the most recent TV show. Anyway, but perhaps Galadriel didn't participate in Anatar's weaseling his influence over Celebrimbor and the Guild of the Jewelsmiths, who rebelled against her benevolent rule and kicked her and Celeborn out of Eregion. But once Anatar's true identity was unveiled by the forging of the One Ring, Celebrimbor found himself in Lorien. As he sought Galadriel's counsel, he was advised to keep the 3 elven rings concealed from Sauron at all costs. And that's how she was bestowed with her Ring of Power, Nenya. During the War of the Elves and Sauron, Eregion fell, which forced Galadriel to travel west, which was now wrought with a longing for the sea. Galadriel ended up in Imaldris, which came to be known as the Refuge of Rivendell, where she held meetings of the White Council. For the remainder of the Second Age, it was said that Galadriel and Celeborn migrated between Rivendell, Lorien, and Dol Amroth, on the Bay of Belfalas. Merely 2 ages ago, Galadriel was filled with an unignorable desire to rule over her own realm in the lands of Middle-earth, but at this moment she longed for nothing else but to return to Valinor. Yet she could not, due to the ban placed upon her for rebelling in the first place. The Third Age began with a commemoration of love. This time, her daughter Celebrian married Lord Elrond. Still, Galadriel sensed a familiar evil lurking in Dol Guldur. Accompanied by Lord Celebrian, Galadriel combed through the Wilderlands, Gondor, and the Woodland Realms, even going as close to Mordor as she possibly could, but did not detect a corporal body. She initially believed that the evil in Dol Dol Guldur, was simply a ring wraith, one of the 9 corrupted kings of the Min. The Third Age also saw the arrival of the Istari, the Order of 5 Wizards, sent by the Valar to keep an eye on Sauron's tyranny over the free peoples of Middle-earth. Lady Galadriel returned to Lorien when the king died without an heir, and the residing elves fled the realm, just as the dwarves of Khazad-dûm were cast out by Durrensbane, the Balrog. Unsurprisingly, Galadriel and her husband were welcomed with open arms, yet they refused to knight themselves as king and queen of the land of Lothlorien. Instead, they picked up the mantles of Lady and Lord of Galadrim. A second White Council came into being, and Galadriel wished for her dear friend Gandalf to lead it, but Saruman took up this role. Together, they managed to chase Sauron out of Dol Guldur yet again. Finally, we come to the most important event of the Third Age, the War of the Ring. Galadriel expected the Fellowship of the Ring to pass through Lothlorien, but when they did, she first noticed Gandalf's absence. Alas, Gandalf the Grey had fallen as he overcame the behemoth Balrog. Lady Galadriel peered into each member's heart and saw what they truly felt. After allowing Frodo to foresee what might come to pass in the Mirror of Galadriel, she bid the company farewell with parting gifts. Along with rations like limbus bread, elvish rope, robes, and boats, Lady Galadriel bestowed unique presents upon each member. For instance, Aragorn received the Stone of Eärendil as a bridal gift from Arwen. Gimli was given 3 strands of her ethereal hair, and finally, Frodo was given the vial filled with Eärendil's starlight. A resurrected Gandalf the White was brought to Lorien by Gwaihir, where Lady Galadriel gave him prophetic messages to be distributed to the scattered fellowship. She asked Aragorn of the lost Dunedain and the extremely haunted paths of the dead. She warned Legolas, the wood elf, of his latent sea longing that would be awakened the moment he heard squawking seagulls in Pelargir. Gimli was endearingly reminded of what he carried, which even Feanor wasn't graced with. Following the Great War of the Ring, Sauron's stronghold fell, and Celeborn hastened to destroy Dol Guldur as well. In the end, Lady Galadriel blessed Aragorn and Arwen's wedding, paid her respects to Theoden's funeral, and severely chastised Saruman for his destruction. On the other hand, she reassured Treebeard of a healed Arda following its marring. Eventually, Frodo found Galadriel and the rest of the wandering company, which included Bilbo and Elrond, right outside the Shire. Together, they departed for the Grey Heavens, where Galadriel patiently waited for her beloved to join her once again.
You are nameless!
How powerful is Galadriel? Strength and durability. Let's revisit Galadriel's intricate genealogy to see just how blessedly mighty she was meant to be. She was the granddaughter of Finwë, and daughter of High Noldoran king Finarfin. Olwe, king of the Teleri Elves, was Galadriel's maternal grandfather, so genetically, Galadriel was unmatched in her strength. Remember that Tolkien spoke of her Amazonian disposition. She was said to be nearly 6'4", towering over other High Elven princes, the same reason she was named Nerwin, aka Man-Maiden, by her mother. But more than a warrior, Galadriel was also the wisest of the Eldar. However, that was a journey hindered by pride and her desire for power. We'll talk about her ring, Nenya, in a minute, but had she not advised Celebrimbor to hide the rings of power from Sauron, the consequences otherwise would have proved far too devastating for Middle-earth. She refused to be deceived by Sauron in the Second Age, again the result of which could have been disastrous. She also correctly called out Gandalf as the best of all 5 of the Istari. In the Unfinished Tales, Tolkien claimed her greatest gift was her insight into the minds of others. These powers of divination were only honed in all the time she spent working under the Valar Aule and Yavanna. Along with this, she was also gifted immense wisdom by Melian, one of the Maiar. Perhaps one could consider that she was also powerful in the way that she viewed people's true desires and compassion, rather than scrutinizing judgment. But her excellent understanding of others' intentions prompted her to be careful, like Feanor, who had a turbulent shadow brewing in him.
Gandalf the Grey did not pass the borders of this land.
What powers did the ring give Galadriel? Was she revealed in her wrath? Now, some believe that Lady Galadriel was born with the ability to read minds, while others say that this power was bestowed upon her by the Ring of Power Nenya. To be clear, Tolkien himself stated in one of his letters that the Ring of Power enhanced the wearer's innate ability, so the powers of telepathy, telekinesis, ergokinesis, aka being able to manipulate the way energy moves, and clairvoyance might have been dormant in her. The ring greatly enhanced them. Now, coming to her ring, the most incredible power Nenya instilled was being able to communicate with other ring-bearers across the lands, concealing her realms and her own mind from Sauron's watchful gaze, and most importantly, perceiving his mind. In the Silmarillion, Tolkien mentioned that the wearers of the Rings of Power could perceive Sauron's mind when he wielded his one ring. Let's talk about a crucial moment in the Fellowship of the Ring novel. Galadriel followed Frodo to look into her silver basin, which showed him the great eye of Sauron. Shortly after this, she showed the halfling her own Ring of Power Nenya, the star of her finger, which had preserved the elven realms by as slowing the decay of time, would fade in power the moment the One Ring was destroyed. Afraid of what's to come, Frodo offered the One Ring to Galadriel, who confessed that she had anticipated this moment with a great desire for the One Ring to rule them all. Just then, a blinding light shone from Ninya. Galadriel was tested for temptation as soon as she stood before Frodo, seeming now tall beyond measurement, and beautiful beyond enduring, terrible and worshipful. But she passed, and her ban was lifted so she could return to Valinor when she pleased. Now in Peter Jackson's iteration of this exchange, Galadriel turned devilish dark green with distorted features, which managed to freak out any poor kid watching this film for the first time. As she trudged through the temptation, debating how powerful she would be with the One Ring, Galadriel claimed, "In place of a dark lord, Middle-earth would have a queen. Not dark, but beautiful and terrible as the dawn, treacherous as the sea." Ah well, you know the rest. This reminded us of the fact that Galadriel was never meant to be a perfect character, untouched by error. She was once again plagued by promises of reverence, desire for unparalleled power and temptation, everything Sauron had to offer. On the other hand, Tolkien described more than one high elf in this state of metamorphosis. He described it as them being revealed in their wrath. What if Lady Galadriel was the last elf on Earth to have witnessed the light of the two trees? As we just mentioned, in Peter Jackson's films, starlight was seen reflecting in her eyes, which was meant to signify this primordial light before the birth of the sun and the moon. This detail was mainly for effect, to really deliver Galadriel's agelessness, and was unrelated to the two trees. But the question still remains, was she the last elf to lay her eyes on the two trees of Valinor? Her kind, who would witness the light from the two trees, was known as the Calaquendi, or Elves of Light. We popularly know them as the High Elves. Now, in the Lord of the Rings films, Galadriel is the only light elf to have actual dialogue, but in the novel, Tolkien mentions elven lords residing in Rivendell, who are the Eldar from beyond the furthest seas. We can also consider the wandering companies of High Elves in the Third Age, who most likely saw the light of the two trees, such as the likes of the Noldor elf named Gildor and Glorion, who lived near Rivendell, and often met Bilbo and Frodo on the outskirts of the Shire. Also, Glorfindel, one of the mightiest elves of the First Age, notably fought a Balrog unto death amidst the fall of Gondolin. He was reincarnated and sent to Middle-earth shortly after. What if Lady Galadriel accepted the One Ring? But let's talk about the worst case scenario for a minute here. We already know that Galadriel deeply desired the One Ring. She knew it would grant her immeasurable power to the extent of becoming the Dark Lord once Sauron fell. We know this as she trudged through the test of temptation, debating how powerful she would be with the One Ring. Galadriel claimed that in place of a Dark Lord, Middle-earth would have a queen. Not dark, but beautiful and terrible as the dawn, treacherous as the sea. Ah well, you know the rest. Even one of the stronger Maya like Gandalf was tempted to wield the ring, but he willed himself not to. He knew his magic, combined with the ring's evil, would be exceedingly terrible. But let's say the children of Iluvatar wished to test their strength by trying to use the One Ring for the greater good. This also would not be possible. We must understand that the One Ring, forged in the fires of Mount Doom, was Sauron's essence. It embodied his will, nature, and purpose. It was a hefty burden to bear for anyone other than its owner. It ate away at the bearer's goodwill, slowly corrupting their hearts and minds till they matched that of the Dark Lord. So even if Galadriel, an elf of the light, attempted to turn the polarity of the One Ring, she would have eventually fallen into its trap. She had also shown tendencies of covertly rebelling against the Valar during the exile of the Noldor. This reminds us of the fact that Galadriel was never meant to be a perfect character, untouched by error. She was once plagued by promises of reverence, desire for unparalleled power and temptation, everything Sauron had to offer. Does Lady Galadriel actually turn dark? Now, did Galadriel ever turn a scary dark green? Or was it the filmmaker's creative liberty? Tolkien described more than one high elf in this state of metamorphosis. He described it as them being revealed in their wrath, like Glorfindel in the unseen world. But what was Galadriel's darkness? The fact that she was susceptible to it meant she understood it and was nearly tempted by it. Frodo offered her the ring, believing that she would be a greater fit as the ring bearer, when in fact, all beings, no matter how moral, mortal or immortal, could fall victim to the seductions of the One Ring. Galadriel was no stranger to the whispers of the shadow, but her mind was strengthened strengthened against it over the ages. She was able to understand Sauron's darkness, the ways it could destroy Middle-earth, and how the temptation of more power for herself jeopardized everything she held dear. The way a young Galadriel had been depicted in the Rings of Power so far hits at this darkness within her, one that was born from the desire to rule over the untouched lands of Middle-earth, one that prompted her to participate in the rebellion. In the show, Galadriel is plagued by anger at her brother Finrod's death. There have been several mentions of a shadow over her compassion, one that could have quickly taken over and made her a deadlier force to be reckoned with. Did Lady Galadriel turn mortal? The most well-known elf to give up her immortality was Luthien for the sake of her beloved Baron. As for Galadriel, she never turned mortal in any circumstance. While her involvement in the rebellion did lead to her exile and eventual ban from the Holy Lands of Old Valinor, she lived well into the Third Age until the ban was lifted, and she was allowed to return to the Undying Lands if she wished to do so. She also decided to stay back in Middle-earth for her husband, Celeborn. While few elves give up their immortality in exchange for fading with the passage of time, there has been a case of a mortal being granted immortality. We're talking about Tuor, the son of Huor. In Tolkien's Legendarium, Tuor was known as a selfless hero who sacrificed his own glory for the sake of others. Under the eye of King Turgon of Gondolin, Tuor came to be known as the Chosen One. He eventually married Turgon's daughter Idril. Tuor was soon prophesied to be a savior for men and elves. Tuor was a significant saving grace during the tragic fall of Gondolin. His son Eärendil was protected from the bloodshed by his father. As we know, Eärendil in turn became the heroic mortal who begged the Valar for help in the War of Wrath against Morgoth. Hence, Tuor was blessed by the Valar and granted immortality, a privilege the race of men has always envied. Case in point, the Númenóreans struggled with the concept of their inevitable demise, which gradually led them to resent the Valar for their timelessness. We all know how that ended for them. In Tolkien's writings, few were meant to never die, while others couldn't escape certain death. Can elves and humans have children together? Well, the short answer is yes, they can. In fact, there are countless instances of this in Tolkien's writings, but keep in mind that half-elf couplings were a tricky decision to make, given the difference in their lifespans and mortalities. As a result of Tolkien's most incredible love story, the child of Beren and Luthien, Dior, had not just Eldor and Edain blood, but he was also part Maya from his maternal grandmother's side. The most well-known elf was Lord Elrond, whose father, Eärendil, was half-elven, as well as his mother and Dior's daughter, Elwing. Both Eärendil and Elwing were given the choice of being either men or elves. They chose to be elves. Their children, Elros and Elrond, were also given a choice. Elros chose to be mortal and went on to become the first king of Númenor, while Elrond chose his elvish roots. Elrond married a full elf, Celebrian, who was Galadriel's daughter. Elrond's daughter, Arwen, fell in love with Aragorn, son of Arathon. Arwen also chose to forfeit her immortality. Finally, we have the case of Imrazor, the Númenórean, who was also a noble Gondorian. He met and fell in love with Sylvan elf Mithrellis. This was how elvish blood mixed into the lines of the Prince of Dol Amroth of Gondor. Marvelous verdict. Could you imagine if Galadriel had failed to overcome temptation and risen as a new power over Middle-earth? Would she have been reminiscent of the Galadriel we presently see in the Rings of Power, blinded by rage and a thirst to avenge her brother's death? As one of the most powerful elves in Tolkien's Legendarium, Galadriel could have chosen to overthrow Sauron and establish dominion over the entire land if she wished to do so. But she passed the test. She diminished, and Ninya turned like a moon rather than a blazing star, as she chose to remain Galadriel. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.